control structures is, as the name suggests, how we control the flow of data within a program, yeah, or how we control the flow of instructions as well. Now, there are certain keywords that you would need to be using whilst you've been given so you might be given a question where they ask you to write your own pseudocode or to interpret a pseudocode. And so you would need to think about what control structure you need to use. So if there is something that needs to be repeated multiple times, you would use the word repeat. So imagine we are reading line by line from a text file. We can say repeat, read line, and obviously we keep repeating that until we've got to the end of the file. Yeah. Or let's say we are adding the ages of people in a room to work out the average. We might say keep adding all of the ages until we got to the end of the number of people that we're adding. So repeat is just a way of being able to. It's a quick way of saying I want to keep doing something over and over again. I'll show you some examples in a little while. Then we've got the for loop. Again, in programming, your practicing of your programming lessons, you would have seen a for loop. You've also got the while loop. Again, the difference between the two is that a for loop is a count controlled loop, which means that we keep iterating up to a specific number of times that we've specified. A while loop would only loop until a condition is met or not met, as the case might be. So you might say while password is not equal to let me in, keep asking for the password. Or while the number is less than 100, keep asking the user to enter a number. Okay, and of course we've got the for loop. We could use a for loop in an example of, say we want to display the 5 times table, for example. We can say for x in range 20, 5 times x. Okay, so it would start from 5 times 0, then 5 times 1, etc. until it gets to 20. Right, and then of course the break is used to stop the loop from executing when a condition is met. So if, for example, we want to stop the loop from carrying on before it gets to the end of the loop, we use the condition. So we'll put an if statement within that loop and say if this condition is met, then break, and then that will stop the loop from carrying on. Yeah. Again, hope to show you an example of that later. The other thing we can have is branches. So a branch is basically like saying if this particular thing happens, go a different route. So you might have heard of branching stories. A branching story, think about that when we think about if statements. So if a condition is met, as in it's true, then take this block of action. Else, if that condition is not met, take this other action. And we can also use an else if, which is basically saying if the first condition is not true, check for this other condition. Yeah. So, and in Python we write it as elif. In pseudocode you can write the word else if. Yeah. If you wrote elif in your exam, that will be perfectly acceptable as well. Right. So let's have a look at some example. Looks rather complicated, but it really is relatively straightforward. I'm going to try and explain the whole code, including the bit that doesn't actually talk about a branch here. So wrong is an empty list. So this is an empty list or an empty array that's been defined. Input, again, very straightforward. We're taking an input of the reg number, and then we're taking an input of current, which is a Boolean thing to say is it yes or no. Registration, again, is another input. And then we've got an if statement, which is checking to see if current is equal to yes and registration is greater than or equal to 2001. Again, we're checking what's been entered here. Then, now the key thing with the word then is that whatever action you then want to happen has to be indented. Okay, that means you need to have a space to show that this action belongs to this condition. Yeah, so the condition, this condition once it's met, then this is the action we want it to take place. Yeah, so we would indent it to say this block belongs to this condition. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. If I just use a pen here to make it clearer. So what we're saying here is, okay, check for this condition here. Okay, if that condition is true, then come inside this block. Yeah, and so, but what's interesting about this scenario is that we've also then got an if statement within another if statement. So we're saying here, well, if this is met, then check to see if this other condition is met. And you notice that we're using the Boolean expressions or and in this pseudocode to be able to try to join multiple conditions together. And the other thing to note is that once our if statement is finished, we have to write the word end if to indicate that with condition is being completed. And our if statement, just go for a different color pen perhaps. Our if statement has to have an accompanying else or else if. Okay, so you notice that these two are on the same line. Okay, so the if and the else if. So we're saying if this condition is met, if it's not met, if it's not met, then go back to here, and that's the general thing about if statements. Just the format of how we would write them. Okay, so hopefully that's perfectly fine, and